In this section, we'll conclude our thoughts over patriarchy, alpha predator male agency, and alpha predator male organization in their macro versions. So, the economy of macro alpha predator male organizations, macro patriarchy, is very brutal, and the points of their economy that's pursued are these things that help spread the genes of men in alpha state. So it's primarily uh, the points of oppressive control memories, such as sex, or such as money, territory, possessions, positions and dominance hierarchies, and territory. Money, possessions, positions and dominance hierarchies, and territory. And unhealthy sex is another point that's pursued, which is there's good healthy sex too. So it's sadism. Uh, Unhealthy sex, what I mean by that is like lots of sex with multiple partners, etc. So sadism is another point pursued by this kind of economy and other predatory motions. Because, as I've said, these points, when they're pursued by this economy, help spread the genes of men in alpha state, the best in this kind of macro scale society context. But these old points pursued by the macro alpha predator male mental adaptations seem to be the main cause of the problems our society faces in progressing into civilization. So the problems of mass wealth inequality, sexism, and other social problems exist because they once were not problems. They were solutions for man to build their ancient large-scale groups, the macro-patriarchy. That's why these health problems of oppression exist today. Not because oppression is abnormal, but because it is very normal in the biosphere. They are evolved adaptations. The oppression of there's systems evolved onto life that help it oppress the system to reach to get the scarce resources and mates to reproduce. So, but these adaptations, though, these kind of oppressive adaptations of life, inhibit the formation of civilization. High technology, high emotion, and high understandings enable us to solve for the problems of scarce access and oppression in a much more honorable, advanced, sustainable way than how patriarchy does. We can make things humane, make enough food, shelter, water, education, and most important, love for all. Without love, there is no motivation to do the aforementioned. From all I've concluded of patriarchy, it would seem evil isn't an aberration, it's an adaptation, one which people are helpless to be controlled by. Sapient life knows not what it does. It has evolved in many cases to know right as wrong, and wrong as right. That's their sickness. An illness in mind. But natural selection has selected their ethics, and that's their biggest, one of the biggest problems they face. They think all these wrong things that destroys their civilization, that destroys their society, prevents society developing into civilization, such as not educating. We need slaves, and we need to not educate them, and there needs to be, we need to have all the money, and no one else needs any money, and they need to get paid for their education. They don't need free education. We don't. There's this idea that the not spending and serving the world. We need a society that's designed around serving the world, not making it serve these kind of patriarchal interests, serving the patriarchy, the machine. And this is their sense of right and wrong. I hear this often. People know right from wrong, and when a crime happens, but to me, when someone says that, I think about all the people throughout history who believed different rights and wrongs, and not just throughout history, but today across the world, what people think is right and wrong is different, and it's in this kind of patriarchal state of nature, of right and wrong. What's right and what's wrong. And we are evolving out of that into like a from this naturally selected subjective perception of right and wrong into a scientific, more familiar one. So that's their sickness, this illness in their mind. Mental illnesses aren't so much a sickness that develops, it's a sickness that is inherited, something they begin with. And it arguably gets worse the larger and larger their society does. But eventually they get themselves out of it. Evil is caused by civilization inhibiting mental adaptations that were evolved onto their system and need help evolving off of. So we'll call these mental maladaptations. Mental maladaptations are patriarchal mental adaptations of the. So you have these kind of alpha predator male mind states and these beta prey female mind states, and they have these mental maladaptations that compose these mind states. You have these mental adaptations, and the sum of which creates the state of someone's mind. You have this kind of more beta prey female mental maladaptations and these alpha predator male mental maladaptations. And these inhibit the development of society into civilization. So you have this patriarchy, and it has all these kind of mind states of it and these kind of mental maladaptations that lock it into place. In patriarchy, you can't get out of patriarchy if everyone's still in a patriarchal state of mind. You have to help them get out of that patriarchal state of mind to help their society get out of that patriarchal state before that society destroys itself. It's important, though, to remember now not to hate people. People aren't the problem. Men aren't the problem. The main problems are mental maladaptations that once helped reach the male's main mating routine. That did in that ancestral macro context. So it's not a certain group of people, but a certain set of mental adaptations that exist in all people as potentials that can be actualized by a certain environment. And to hate people, to be disgusted with them or find them gross, are themselves mental maladaptations. People aren't the problem. Mental maladaptations are the problem, which cause people to oppress. These mental maladaptations cause oppression in people's behavior. And hate is one of these maladaptations. We only contribute to the problem when we hate people for their problems, because the problem is those mental maladaptations, and hate is one of them. Mental maladaptations and what alpha predatory agency perceives as power are one and the same, which makes sense. Life is kind of evolved to perceive this stuff that helps it replicate as power. Of course it would. So in chimpanzees and bucks fighting over the territory and the mate, they have this kind of naturally selected perception of power. And it's such as when in human society, this is money, the oppressive control memories, the money, the territory, possessions, positions, and dominance hierarchies, and being able to also elicit violence and sex on the system, unabated. These are all things that are perceived from this macro alpha predator male agency as power. Those old alpha predator male adaptations make us think this way, that those things are power. But these are now, these are actually mental illnesses that not only destroy society, but prevents our society from evolving into civilization. The patriarchal mental maladaptations lock society into patriarchy to prevent society from evolving into civilization and up the Kardashev scale. Though this time, so it's not power that these poor souls have known. It's a sickness they are powerless against, helplessly misled by their naturally selected perceptions of what is valuable, what is power, and all what these poor people think is power is powerless against this sickness. Worse, really, as it amplifies the sickness. Accumulated oppressive control exacerbates oppressive alpha predator male mental adaptations. So a tragic positive feedback loop occurs between this sickness, this mental sickness of the patriarchy, and what it thinks is power, this false power, such as greed, making us get money, and the money then making us more greedy. So the sickness of alpha predator male adaptations makes us get this false power, and then the false power then amplifies these alpha predator male adaptations. Ergo, when we see atrocities committed by the agencies of men in high positions of what they consider power, we must understand that they are helpless, just like the helpless prey who are oppressed in these atrocities. The leaders are helpless against their own evolution and how such evolution determines behavior, helpless against naturally selected patriarchal leadership instincts. We had no choice in the stars that bore us. Man had no choice in the environment, development of his ancestors. His decision was not his own, but one ordained by millions of years of evolution. Societal impacts of these mental maladaptations are horrendous. They create a self-destructive society. Our society isn't created based on the science of society, but rather these old alpha predator male instincts, these old maladaptations, which cause us to hold social understandings back. Not understandings, but propaganda and force create and maintain patriarchies. It's very similar and descendant of chimpanzees. They're not structured on science, but a mixture of force and social skills by an alpha male to help spread the genes of men in alpha state. That's how they're similar. These patriarchies and chimpanzee bands. So these maladaptations make us blind, or make us build society out of oppression, not reason and science, and prevents us from adapting, from evolving new adaptations, in particular knowledge of society. So patriarchy, this maladaptation gets in place, and then it prevents itself from ever evolving. And that's one of its biggest flaw. This is really important to understand what the biggest flaw of patriarchy is, that it's not the atrocities that it commits, but the fact that it can't evolve out of committing atrocities. It can't evolve out of its structure. So, because this is really interesting to think about, I would estimate that the resources our society uses, we would estimate just by looking at all the different sources of data and doing a minor general calculation of all the sources of information I see about, just propaganda versus real societal data and information and the reasoning behind them. But I would estimate that the resources our society uses on all the sources of propaganda through history to confuse people about society so that it may continue and grow its oppressive structure far outweighs the resources spent on trying to actually understand society. Teach people these understandings so that they can help us understand society more by then using science, and also apply these understandings. That's one of the, as I've said, biggest flaws of these mental maladaptations of the patriarchy, is that they maintain themselves by preventing science from operating on them, to reveal them as self-destructive. Mental maladaptations of patriarchy cause utter destruction, but the most destructive thing about them is that they prevent their destruction from being stopped by preventing their hosts from figuring out that they are self-destructive. It's these demons, these naturally selected demons that men have kind of been evolved to pursue, to spread his genes in that macro scale context. And he's not questioning them. And he just kind of is like other animals, the bucks fighting, etc., pushed and biased towards doing this. And then this also, the demon also on his, in his mind, on like, he's almost like the shoulder, on his shoulder telling him what to do. These, like, you can visualize like these parts of his mind telling him what to do. His mind, no, telling him what to do, no. But you know, and they're like telling him what to do, and they also prevent him from like holding up a mirror to them and like realizing that, oh God, these are like demons that are going to destroy me. You know, he prevents that because instead of spending all his resources onto understanding society, it's all about confusing people about society. So he can never figure out that the society he's building is this destructive thing that's being created by this naturally selected demon on his shoulder. So the demon like puts his hand over his eyes and whispers in his ear and tells him where to go. So, and that is this emotional, there's this emotional, delusional, naturally selected perception, this delusional, emotional, naturally selected emotional perception that men inherits, this demons that he inherits, and he spreads, and it creates within everyone this kind of emotionally biased delusion that doesn't stand up to stats and science, and prevents themselves from, you know, any type of science from being done on them, these emotional biases, but nonetheless they motivate his behavior. In the final conclusion of alpha predator male agency and mental maladaptations, instead of meeting these problems with hate, we need to love, forgive, accept, and educate our way out of the problems. We have to decrease the activity of those old troubled parts of our minds and increase the activity of these newer, more familial ones. In this solution arises the family group. In this solution, it transitions us away from patriarchy into family. Men and people aren't evil. They're poor, helpless animals. And men are above animals. I would say people are. They're more, it's a very special kind of animal. They're all special, though. But they're all poor and helpless. There's no doubt about that. Under control of their instincts. Still caught in the oppressive state of nature. They all have adapted to their environment, and the environment has been very oppressive, making them oppressive. They need help with these instincts, these adaptations. They need help adapting to the new context of civilization. My solution is sort of like what humans have done with dogs and domesticating them from wolves. Man needs not hurt, but domesticated, so to speak. Needs taught out of these old, wild, naturally selected macro patriarchal instincts that make him more predatory and wolf-like, and taught into this new familial state of mind that makes him more family, dog-like. So we're just trying to, we just need to be dogs, man. We just need to be doggies.